Vigano Television Network. I'm John the Son of Thunder here with Ryan the Retrograde, and we have a full segment for you of their weekly recaps.
Huge news.
So first off, Ryan, would you like to get to the Vigano news? What did Vigano do this week?
Yeah, I have a question here, and I think some people have been raising this question whether Archbishop Vigano is a false prophet. You know that he predicted that Donald Trump would win the election.
Sort of.
Yeah. What exactly did he say?
Well, he quoted scripture, and LifeSite News ran the article. I'll link it down below. They ran the article saying, Vigano prophesies Trump victory, or something along like those lines. Yeah. I don't think he specifically said Donald Trump will win whenever all hope seems lost, but LifeSite News strongly implied it. And so I think it might have been a little spin from LifeSite, but you read the article and decide for yourself. But anyway, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, and a couple weeks ago, Father Stephen Imbarrato, I don't know if he was per se talking about Vigano, but maybe talking about some of these other so-called Catholic prophets and whatnot. Namely that he outlined the situation in the Old Testament, which was that if you claim to be a prophet, and said, thus says the Lord, XYZ, and then your prediction doesn't come true, then that means that you're a false prophet who falsely prophesied in the name of God, and the penalty for that was you were stoned to death for being a false prophet. So these people nowadays who are saying, like, God will do X, Y, and Z, and if it's a definite thing, and I don't know, I'm not 100% sure if Vigano said Trump would win the election, he might have couched it or whatever, but the fact that he made this prediction, and a lot of these other Protestant pastors, preachers, visionaries and stuff were doing all these prophecies about Trump, and then he didn't win, looks really bad for that. Are they false prophets? Now, Brett pointed out something else. He said, well, Vigano, if he did prophesy Trump would win the election, maybe he's right. Trump did win, but then they just stole it from him, and Trump didn't do anything to stop them. So, I don't know. That's possible. The question was also raised, last week we talked about Taylor Marshall. Where is he? Did he turn set of the contest? Was he canceled or whatever? Well, now he's back, and somebody pointed out in our last show, in the comments, that Taylor Marshall seems to have purged all his Donald Trump content.
Yes.
And did he do it to avoid demonetization? Is he he did the show and he was like, well, don't put all your eggs and don't trust in princes, as the scriptures say. And that's true. This was another sub-point I have here, is that I think there's some Catholics out there who put too many eggs in the Trump basket. And it was like they went and wagered everything on the roulette wheel of Trump, and then they lost, which is the way things go. You have to understand in elections, very rarely are they blowouts. Most often they're close. And I think that Vigano, Taylor Marshall, and Father Z, it seems to me that they put so many eggs in this Trump basket, and then that basket was dropped and destroyed, and all the eggs were broken. And now they're trying to pick up the pieces and see. Now, Vigano, he still has, the whole expose Francis, corruption in the church angle. So does Taylor Marshall, but he was a lot more connected to Trump because he worked for the Trump campaign. And then Father Z, he seems to me kind of in the Taylor Marshall boat, although he's been around, a lot longer. He's a priest, so he's already in hot water. He's already basically got kicked out of his diocese for being too political, I guess they're saying. So that's the situation there.
Rod Dreher has a new book being released. Ryan, what can you tell us about it?
Yes, thanks, John. Rod Dreher's new book is called Live Not by Lies, a Manual for Christian Dissidents. So this guy is almost like prophetic. His previous book to this was called The Benedict Option, which discusses how to disengage from modern culture in order to keep your faith, to live in the world but not of the world. And as we had discussed on our sub-show about Amish versus Hasidic, I think the Benedict Option, while I haven't read it, has some elements of that in there, how to form this Christian culture separated from the world. And in his latest book, as I said, Live Not by Lies, a manual for Christian dissidents, he interviews and discusses how Christians survived and resisted the regime, the totalitarian regime that existed in the Soviet bloc. And here it is in early 2021 where it looks like the Soviet States of America are encroaching upon us. Everybody's being canceled from the internet. You're not allowed to have these opinions. Your bank accounts are closed. We're going to kick you out of universities and whatnot. Man, Rod Dreher is spot on with what is going on in America. And he gives you concrete ideas on how to resist this and keep your faith and keep your sanity throughout this crisis.
Cancel culture has become a popular item or a popular activity among liberals. Ryan, how do we combat cancel culture?
Well, John, you know that you have been already canceled from Twitter. Remember, if you watch that, there'll be a link in the description in that video that we did where you were excommunicated from Twitter, #canceled. And you can see what's going on. We're here in the catacombs because we've been #canceled. But there was a really good episode of Meaning of Catholic, and it had Flanders and Jeremiah Bannister, and I believe Kennedy was on there as well. And they gave some ideas, and I'll summarize those. I was thinking to myself about how do we combat this cancel culture. The first item would be we have to stop relying on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter and take a step back from them. And I thought about, well, before those existed, how did people communicate online? And there were blogs and websites. And those things you actually have to pay for, whereas YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter are free. So something free, if I just take it if I gave you this device, and I said, well, here's the terms and conditions, and I'm free to change these terms and conditions anytime I want. If I come and just take this, and it was free to you, the amount of complaining that you can do is very minimal. So, you're not paying anything for YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I mean, they're actually paying you. That's how we're able to maintain this jet-setting lifestyle that we live with all the ad revenue. So you're probably going to have to step back from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and not rely upon those things. Before blogs and websites, there was emails. So email is a private one-to-one correspondence, although it relies on the internet. So if they take away the internet, one step back from that would be text messages, which can either be to a single person or a group. One step back from that are actual phone calls, maybe with a landline, and you call up and say, hey, how's it going? Did you read this book? Or who are you voting for? Don't you think that election was stolen? Whatever. Right now, nobody's going to listen to that phone call and arrest you. There's no secret police listening. One step back from that are letters. So if there's no more phones, if they take that away, you might actually have to write with real pen and paper a letter. Dear John, how is the show going? Sorry to hear we have no internet or YouTube or electricity and everything's been canceled. I'm sending this by the Pony Express. Take care, Ryan the Retrograde.
Well, the Pony Express is faster than the USPS, but...
So there you go, real letters. And if you don't have real letters, if that's censored, well, then a step back from that is in-person visits. You go visit somebody and knock on the door and have a cup of coffee. And if that becomes impossible because you're not allowed to have contact with this forbidden person, well, then you might have to do what spies do and write encrypted notes, leaving them in secret drop boxes and using signals like, if I touch my nose, that means the plan goes on. If anybody's watching, you know what that means. Execute Order 72. Another thing to do to combat cancel culture is you need to know people in real life and not rely upon people in YouTubes. Like, we like our viewers and everything, but to be honest, none of you are real. I mean, in the sense that we don't know you. But I know John, and before we did YouTubes, I knew him, and Brett, and everybody who's appeared on this show. So my suggestion would be start in your Latin Mass community. I mean, if you don't go to a Latin Mass, start. In some places, it might be too late to begin this because there's COVID rules. Maybe you can't even have Mass anymore. Well, do what you can, but start going to your Latin Mass and get to know people and get their contact information. You may need it later on. Get their actual addresses, their phone numbers in case the internet is shut down. If you have their address, you can go ride a horse, a bicycle. I mean, if gasoline's available, drive your car and go visit them. Talk to people. And this was interesting that they mentioned on Meaning of Catholic is we're probably going to have a return to print media. And they mentioned that there are still some real print newspapers that are out there. Catholic Family News, The Remnant, and Culture Wars, which is a magazine published by E. Michael Jones. And also consider looking out for real DVDs of talks. Maybe if there's some old stuff by Michael Davies, Archbishop Lefebvre, Keep the Faith Media, they have those cassette tapes and whatnot. Real books, that's the most important thing. You're going to have some real books. So I have a collection of liturgical books and chant books, which I'll use if the lights go out. We'll still be able to have Mass, sing the Divine Office, plan liturgies with the Fortescue book, etc. So that is, ladies and gentlemen, how you combat cancel culture. Remember, friends don't let friends get canceled.
Next on the agenda is Tim Gordon speaks out against the self-cancellation of the March for Life. Now, I do want to point out that Tim Gordon had some interesting interviews. He interviewed Bishop Peprocki and Father Mark Goring within the past week, and so I'd encourage you to check out those interviews. And so, Ryan, what do you have to say about Tim Gordon's video criticizing the March for Life?
Yeah, it was a really good video. It came right on the day or the day after that the mainstream March for Life said we're canceling the whole thing. And they blamed the riots and COVID and all this other stuff. And as counterpoints, Tim Gordon was out there and did this excellent video. Father Stephen Imperato had done a video, and he said this thing: you can see the mainstream corporate pro-life movement is just not willing to do anything difficult to save babies and stop abortion. And I watched Tim's video, really good. Had some good commentary on the weakness, spinelessness, fecklessness, it's a word he often uses, for the leadership in the March for Life and the pro-life movement and the Catholic bishops. And he pointed out something that we had discussed in a video a long time ago, and I don't even know if we ever aired that video, if it was part of something else, when we had discussed that we should stop using the word pro-life because it's so ambiguous. You see now what the libs, the Biden bishops like Supich and Bad Tobin, Nighty Night Tobin, and whoever else these guys are, Whirl, the Holy Wilton, they're talking about like, oh, you need to wear the mask, and if you don't, you're not pro-life, or you need to get the jab, because if you don't get the jab, then you're not going to save lives. You're not pro-life. So now pro-life means pro-lockdown, pro-mask, pro-jab, anti-death penalty, whatever you put in there.
Eco-theology.
Yeah, living wage,
Unions.
Yeah, gay unions. It's just what kind
workers'
of
unions.
Oh, workers' unions. Yeah, cut out that part about the gay unions.
They might even throw that in there.
Maybe.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. You never know. But so Tim pointed out, let's just say and be explicit what we're about, which is anti-abortion. I am anti-abortion. Yeah. And I said when we did that video, whether it was 6 months or a year ago, I'm not calling myself pro-life anymore, because if pro-life means masks, jabs, anti-death penalty, that's not me. I'm just anti-abortion. Or as Tim has said, we need a better slogan, maybe like abolish abortion. Just chant that, abolish abortion now. no more abortions, abolish. I'm an abolitionist. It's an easy slogan to have. And it's explicit. Nobody can hide a million things behind the moniker pro-life. If you say, are you anti-abortion or pro-abortion? And then this is another thing of the episode that we did recently about using language and don't letting the conversation get sidetracked, is you put your focus on the issue, abortion. Are you pro-abortion or pro-life? Don't let people say choice and this kind of thing. And there, see, I used the word pro-life. Are you pro-abortion or anti-abortion? Don't use pro-life, anti-life. Don't use right to choose, women's rights or whatever. If somebody asks you, you say, are you for or against abortion? Are you pro-abortion or anti-abortion? Make the discussion about abortion and not vague things like life, choice, and all that stuff.
And a thing here about Tim Gordon is that we were critical of his stance on the SSPX, but I think I do respect Tim Gordon because I pretty much agree with him on a lot of things. It seems like his recent stuff has gotten really good.
Yeah, what happened was, so he's on that SSPX bandwagon, and he joined anti-SSPX bandwagon. He, joined forces with Voris and some Catholic Answers and all that, but it seems that that's now in the past, although it will probably come back up again when they try to cancel the Mass. But he's moved on to bigger and better things, and so he's talking about family, gender roles, he's talking about economics, talking about language and how to use it, back to the rules for retrograde stuff.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, we'll return our focus to those ideas. And I think part of that is in the show, the long segment that we did about Hasidic and Amish. In that is some rules for retrograde stuff that's in that as well. And we've got to be a lot more savvy than we are now. That led us into this point where we hooked our horses to Trump. He lost, or the election was stolen, or who knows what exactly happened. And now everybody's holding an empty bag and wondering what to do. Well, it's time to be proactive and start actually coming up with a plan that's not I'm against this or I'm against that. It's about establishing the social reign and the political reign of Jesus Christ. That's what this is about.
On our final segment for today, we're going to talk about the USCCB. So, as you know, Joe Biden was sworn in as president, and the USCCB had a reaction to it. Archbishop Gomez wrote this letter about... Now, one thing I noticed in the letter was that he said that Biden is Catholic in certain areas, and he praised him for being Catholic in certain areas, but he raised concerns about his pro-life stance. And
or lack thereof.
Well, yeah, I guess so. His pro-abortion stance. Yeah. And so what happened was Cardinal Supich released a series of tweets criticizing the USCCB's decision. Now, it came out later that the USCCB was told by the Vatican not to publish the letter, which the USCCB went ahead anyway, or at least it got leaked. I'm not really sure the full story on that. But Cardinal Supich was the only one who was critical of this, and it seems like no one else came to his defense. But a lot of bishops did support the USCCB letter, including Archbishop Vigano, the good Tobin, probably Strickland. I mean, he's been speaking out against everything.
Definitely he did, yeah.
I can't think of that many more off the top of my head.
Stitka?
Yeah, I mean, but there were at least 10 bishops that came out in support of this letter, and so Sample is another one. Yeah. But I guess it goes to show that these bishops are supporting this pro-life movement, and a lot of people are asking, where were they 3 months ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. I forget who made mention of this, but yeah, why were there no strong denunciations of Joe Biden's pro-abortion agenda while he was running for president? But instead, no, it was a hot potato that nobody wanted to touch. You know why? Because they are so afraid. Basically, they've lost everything, and they do have political power, but here's what it is. They are so afraid that if they go and make a move and say, you shouldn't vote for Joe Biden, and then if people vote for Joe Biden and he wins, that the government is going to come and cancel the whole Catholic Church. And they're so afraid, and they know that will happen, and there's nothing they can do about it. And the reason for that is because they've been so soft on Democrat politicians since 1970. And even in the late 60s when they were introducing laws to legalize contraception. They have not used their episcopal power to enforce the rules of the church on Catholic politicians. And so they let the thing get out of control, and now you have the Kennedys and Biden, and it's too far gone. They can't rein this in. So all they can do is issue these kind of, statements or whatever and say, oh, well, we wish you were pro-life, and we maybe even condemn his pro-abortion legislation he's going to introduce. But then you have Supich who comes out there and says, well, this is unbalanced, and we need to try to work with these people and understand the situation. The time for understanding was a long time ago, and you can see that the USCCB is divided. I don't know how divided it is.
Division.
Yeah,
that's a sin with the USCCB.
It's divisive, yeah. And so I think the problem here is Supich really was out of line. He might get in trouble for being divisive. Because the whole USCCB, I don't know who signed that letter. I don't think Gomez's signature was on there. I just think it said, this is the position of the USCCB. And they've said the lamestream fake news has said that it was Gomez who wrote the thing, but I would be shocked if he did this on his own. I think there were a lot of other bishops who had input to this. And you can see, it caught off, Supich was caught off guard. He was like, how did this happen? This should have gone through N number of committees, and I should have had a say in this. And, so he had apparently 4 angry tweets against the thing on Twitter. So you can see Joe Biden, 1 week into office, has succeeded in dividing the USCCB. So it's great. Maybe after a month, they'll have excommunicated each other, and you'll have, Supich will be there. He'll be at dinner with Joe Biden, and they'll be eating dead baby soup, Ooh, these aborted babies are so tasty, and they'll be excommunicated for real from the real Catholic Church. Maybe Gomez and Cordileone will become real Catholics and get a spine. We'll see.
Well, and it'll be interesting to watch the trajectory of this, because I wonder if some of the bishops, because Roe versus Wade and March for Life anniversary, I guess, is coming up. It'll be interesting to see if they will keep pushing this idea that we need to be pro-life, because a lot of most bishops once a year they will say, I'm pro-life, and they'll make a pro-life statement once a year. They're around the time of the March for Life, and it just so happens to be around that time, and so I wonder if they're just going to continue to push for this or not. Yeah. But it is encouraging to see them at least speak out whenever they didn't speak out before the election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they're doing something right now, at least. Crying wolf when the wolf is here eating the sheep.
This has been EVTN News, your source for Vigano's every move. Until next time, thank you so much